Hi guys, I'm Yasmin, this is Nadia, and this is Stephanie on the other screen. And today we have collaborated to give you our top tips on how to overcome stress, burnout, and emotional eating so you can have the most productive and enjoyable year yet. So I'm going to pass over to Stephanie to introduce herself properly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Stefani, and I'm a dietitian and nutritionist. I worked in hospitals, clinics, and catering services in both Lebanon and Dubai. I'm currently based in France and have been consulting in English, French, and Arabic. My approach around diet and food is very holistic. I'm pretty much an intuitive eater advocate. And I believe that it's important to maintain a good relationship with your health, with food, with your body, and to acknowledge that awareness and mindfulness are really key factors in improving your lifestyle and your well being. So, my specialties include gastrointestinal disorders, gut health in general, cardiovascular diseases, hypertension, diabetes, metabolic syndrome, PCOS, insulin resistance, imbalance in hormones, and pregnancy, breastfeeding, childhood nutrition above 5 years of age, weight management. But I don't give strict diets, hence the intuitive eating and mindful eating approach. So, this is it from my end.
Okay.
Back to you, girls.
Hi guys, so yes, I'm Nadia and this is Yasmin from All Round Abundance. We help ambitious high achievers who put a lot of pressure on themselves and experience repetitive burnout go from unfulfilled and depleted to refocus, re-energized and re-inspired so that they can achieve all their 9 to 5 business and personal goals. So you can find us on Instagram or YouTube at All Round Abundance. And a little backstory on us is that Yasmin and I went through many years of consistent burnout when we were building and renovating our properties and when we were doing our law degree and building our law careers. And we created this hustle burnout cycle. But now we manage more things than ever, but we do it from a very balanced state without burnout. And we did that by creating better habits and practices, but more importantly, gaining awareness of subconscious beliefs that were keeping us in burnout and creating burnout inducing behaviors, and we reprogram those beliefs. So now I'm going to hand you over to Yasmin and she's going to take us through the definition and symptoms of burnout. So firstly, burnout is often defined as a state of physical, emotional or mental exhaustion, usually caused by excessive stress and demands. So now you may be wondering, am I burnt out? Because a lot of the times it can be difficult to identify when everyone around us is stressed, overworked and overwhelmed. So I'm going to go through some of the main symptoms you may be experiencing if you're burnt out. So firstly, feeling physically run down is very common when you're in or approaching burnout. You start to notice a deterioration in your well-being and your health. You might notice headaches and aches and pains in your neck and your back, heart palpitations, and also extreme levels of fatigue and tiredness. And also having a sense of failure, self-doubt, or defectiveness is also very common. You may also find yourself dragging yourself to things and things that you once really loved and enjoyed. You also usually find it very hard to make decisions. You may also get irritable and find yourself being hostile towards others, which may seem really out of character for you. You might also find yourself wanting to run away and escape your circumstances or avoid doing anything you have to do. Another symptom is you might find yourself making really poor food decisions and turn to food as a comfort and emotionally eat. And this is where I'm going to hand you over to Stephanie to explain more.
Okay, so there are two parts I'm going to explain to you. The first one is more the scientific part, like more the physiological end of the spectrum. And then we're going to talk about the emotional eating and the nutritional part. Starting with the physiological one, let's define stress and chronic stress. So, stress can have a number of effects on our appetite and weight. And in some cases, stress can cause a loss of appetite, leading to weight loss. This is because stress can interfere with the body's ability to digest nutrients and absorb them. As well, it can also interfere with the production of the hormones like cortisol, which is the main stress hormone. And this one triggers the fight or flight response or your survival response, during which the appetite is usually suppressed. Now, cortisol plays a lot of important roles in the body, and it is released by the adrenal gland in response to a physical threat, such as, let's say, an injury, or maybe you fell down, or a mental threat like a deadline at work, or maybe you have an exam the second day. And it helps us regulate everything from the sleep cycle, circadian rhythm, to the inflammation in our body, blood pressure, as well as blood sugar levels. When it's not about acute stress, it's more of a chronic stress. Chronic stress can lead to an increase in the production of cortisol in the body, but for a longer period of time. So it's there permanently in a higher amount than needed. And cortisol, as I was saying, isn't fundamentally bad. It's helpful in the short term, but being exposed to it on the longer run can lead to chronic stress response, which includes more anxiety, more stress, fatigue, depression, as well as inflammation. It can also cause an increase in appetite. So, when cortisol levels are continuously high, the body is more likely to crave high fat, high sugary food, so fast or junk food in general, or we can also call them comfort food. So whenever this happens, it provides a temporary sense of pleasure or satisfaction, but on the longer run, it might get us into the emotional, like vicious cycle of emotional eating. On the spot, it reduces the feelings of stress and anxiety. But over time, this can lead to weight gain, and it can also do certain changes in our body processes, making it more likely to also store more abdominal fat, which could contribute to a higher risk of cardiovascular diseases and blood pressure and even inflammation. So it's important to tackle the subject in different ways. Now, regarding the more psychological and nutritional part, what is emotional eating? Emotional eating is a reaction to this chronic stress that you're feeling. It's when we eat to soothe our emotions, to tame them down. And it's not for physiological hunger or real hunger. The brain will try to seek a way for us to feel better when we eat, and we get an instant hit of dopamine, which is the one of the feel-good hormones. So it's exactly the same way as a baby who needs to be calmed down after being fed or after being held, and it's a sort of instant gratification that has stayed with us throughout the years. Now, I'm not saying that if you're hungry, you shouldn't be eating on the spot, but whenever you're feeling other emotions or feelings, it's important to manage those before eating. While it's easier for us to turn to comfort food than to feel our emotions, it's no longer serving us. And the main problem here is that we actually beat ourselves up after the emotional eating episodes. So think about it this way. Typically, emotional eaters, they don't feel, they eat, and then they beat themselves up. But my suggestion is to practice feeling your emotion, not to eat, and then be kind to yourself. Now, maybe it's easier said than done. And this is why I'm going to explain to you how to cope with emotional eating on the longer run, how to stop eating your feelings. All right, so the answer to that is to brainstorm different coping mechanisms to handle stress and to get your emotions out of your system as much as possible. So just to reduce this level without using food, of course. So the toolkit box is super important for you to have and get back to every single time you're about to emotionally eat. And I'm going to give you a few examples of coping mechanisms from a toolkit box. The first one is, of course, to start by practicing deep breathing when stressed. Since our bodies don't know the difference between physical and perceived stress, it's important for you to slow down and take 5 to 10 breaths. This way you trick your brain to feeling that it's fine, everything is okay. And it will help you also consciously know what to decide or what is your next step. The second one, which is very important, it's to identify and put a name to that feeling. So are you feeling lonely? Are you feeling anxious? Is it boredom? When you write your feeling, and actually it's sometimes we can't identify it easily, so it's a kind of a challenge, but bit by bit you're going to understand yourself more. Mm-hmm. And whenever you write on a journal or a letter, it will be a cathartic journey. You're going to feel much better after it. It will make you feel clearer and calmer, like your brain will be clearer. And if you decide on having a food and mood diary, you can also link the comfort food that you take after or within a particular emotion. So you'll be able to tackle the repetitive patterns that you typically have. Let's say, for example, you eat chips when you're very anxious, or you eat chocolate when you're sad, and you'll know how to adjust. The third coping mechanism is to find joyful movement, and just to enjoy a workout and not consider it a punishment. Of course, you might need a bit of a push before you started, but just remember how it makes you feel while you're doing it and afterwards. And that could be really anything, like walking outside, yoga, Zumba, you name it. The fourth one is to have hobbies, and it could be, listening to music or reading. But I would also suggest something that you can do with your hands, because it's pretty helpful when someone has binge or emotional eating cycles, to use their hands. Let's say knitting, coloring book, it could be baking, really anything. Of course, praying and meditating from a spiritual point of view is super important. Mm-hmm. Now, we went through the behavioral toolkit. Let's go through the nutritional toolkit. The first one is to eat regular balanced meals and avoid skipping meals, simply because whenever you eat regular meals that include a variety of healthy foods, you're going to help your blood sugar levels to stay stable and to keep your cortisol also at a normal range. You are going to also reduce the cravings to junk food, and just remember that whenever you're feeling starved or hangry, this could lead to physiological stress and possibly binge or emotional eating episodes. The second nutritional kit is to increase your intake of proteins and fiber-rich foods. So proteins from lean meats, fish, chicken, fibers from whole grains, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, brown rice, etc. Why? Because they both slow down the rate of digestion and make you feel fuller for a longer period of time. And the third one is to change your routine, because our environment sometimes triggers certain cravings or behaviors that we're used to, certain habits as well. So, for example, if you've always had the chips while watching your favorite series at night, you could try to shift the snack. You can have air pop popcorn, or you can have carrots as a start. Or later on, you could even change to your own room, be in bed, have a herbal tea, and read a good book. So whenever you change your environment, this typically helps. And having said that, there are certain foods that reduce inflammation and metabolize cortisol in the body. And those include foods that are high in vitamin B, specifically vitamin B12, which is found typically in animal products. So meat, beef, organ meats, chicken, eggs, as well as fortified cereals and nutritional yeast. The second one is foods that are high in omega-3. So those reduce inflammation. They are found in fish, so salmon, mackerel, tuna, anchovies, herring, as well as walnuts, chia, and flax seeds. Foods that are rich in magnesium are known to relax the muscles, and they reduce inflammation as well as metabolize cortisol. They also help regulate the heartbeat and your blood pressure, so they decrease blood pressure. And whenever we are stressed, we excrete more magnesium in our urine. So, hence the need to have more magnesium in our diets. And the importance of adding magnesium to our diet is increased whenever we're more anxious or stressed. And you can add magnesium through pumpkin seeds, pistachios, broccoli, spinach, avocado, bananas, and dark chocolate. So it's a win-win. Foods that promote healthy gut microbiome are also super important because most of the serotonin or happy hormone in our body is found in our gut. So having good bacteria or probiotics in our gut helps us improve our mental health. And actually, there's a direct link between our gut and our brain. So it's called the gut-brain axis. High fiber foods or prebiotics are very important. So make sure that you have enough fruits, vegetables, and whole grains within your week. And probiotics can be found also, which are actually the good bacteria. They can be found in live cultured yogurt, Greek yogurt, kombucha, kimchi, sauerkraut as well. And the last point is to stay hydrated. So whenever you are dehydrated, it is a stress to your body. Make sure that your urine color is mainly clear, like a transparent yellow most of the time. And try to also limit foods that increase cortisol and inflammation in the body, such as alcohol, caffeine, saturated fats, and added sugar, candy, etc. You can definitely have them, but in moderation, and as long as you're aware of the effect that they have in your body.
Our second tip is to discover the root cause of your burnout, which may also help you to get to the root cause of your emotional eating as well. So if you are someone who has experienced burnout time and time again, the most impactful thing you can do is to get to the root cause of your burnout. And this will help you not only control and prevent burnout in the future, but it will also help you to have compassion for yourself when you are on your recovery journey, and that will only assist in your burnout recovery. So tips such as rest, having boundaries, and controlling your inner critic are all great tools to help you reduce your chances of burnout. But you need to also dig a little bit deeper to find out why you are not doing those things in the first place. So behind these habits are beliefs controlling your burnout-inducing behaviors, and those need to be explored and either let go of or redefined. So when people start to do this deeper work, what they find is sometimes their burnout is actually due to the fact that their worth is tied up in their work, and they are pushing themselves to work to try and prove themselves or feel good enough. Other people find that they are using work to escape from something psychologically or emotionally that they need to deal with. So a lot of the time, beliefs created in childhood can create needs or desires that cause people to burn out in the pursuit of having those needs met, even in adult life. And that's why we recommend a tool called shadow work, which helps you to explore the inner child with the aim to heal any wounds driving your behaviors that are causing you to burn out. And we do talk about the process of shadow work in a lot of our YouTube videos, and we also have a free masterclass which takes you through a step-by-step of this, which we'll link down below. But just to give you an overview of the shadow work process, it's really to get still, maybe go somewhere quiet, meditate if that works for you, and to really explore your thoughts and emotions. So you can ask yourself a few questions, which we're going to give you now. So you may want to ask yourself, what are the beliefs I grew up with about working hard? As a child, what did my accomplishments mean to me and those around me? And how do I feel about the relationship between my work and my worth? So when you do this self-reflection work, you'll be able to understand what beliefs have led you to, or keep leading you to burnout. And that is the key to stopping yourself from keep on experiencing burnout, because you are addressing the root cause.
So speaking of a series of questions to ask yourself, there's also an easy way to manage emotional eating by simply asking yourself a few questions as part of a step-by-step guide or a grid. The first question is, am I hungry? If yes, then definitely go and eat. If no, then what am I feeling? That's the main question to ask yourself. Am I stressed? Am I bored, lonely, anxious, overworked? Or am I just sad that the food on the table is done, or on my plate because it was so yummy? So it does happen. And it's important to feel those emotions, which needs a lot of practice and acceptance. Then you could use the toolkit that you have on hand and that we already discussed or I explained before. And you give yourself a bit of time to process the emotion. Then afterwards, after processing the emotion, if you still want to, you could ask yourself if you still want that cookie. And if the answer is yes, then you own that choice and eat the cookie. It might just be taste hunger, or within that time, you ended up feeling really hungry. But while you're eating, just ask yourself, how does the food taste? Is the cookie sweet or too sweet? Good enough? How's the texture? Is it chewy? Is it crunchy? So those are very important questions, and they are part of the mindful eating process. And mindful eating in general is the fact of being present in the moment and focusing on the foods that you're having and all of your senses as well. It can be done, of course, after you have felt the emotion, especially if the emotion was very intense. So try to enjoy your food while not having distractions. And if you are overthinking, for example, it's a way of distracting yourself with your thoughts. If you're anxious, you might be eating mindlessly instead of mindfully. So this is something to really have a look at and notice. And when you mindfully eat, you will also pay more attention to your body's fullness cues or signals. And you are going to most likely stop before you feel uncomfortably full, or stuffed, let's say. And you're going to also avoid the regret of overeating that usually comes within the emotional eating cycle that you need to break.
So our next tip is to strengthen your boundaries, let go of people-pleasing tendencies, and start to put your own needs first. So those of us who struggle with boundaries and are people pleasers are so much more prone to burnout because we end up taking on more than we can handle and often have way too much on our plate because we'd rather say yes to people and struggle ourselves than say no to them and risk disappointing them or letting them down. But if we continue to people please and say yes to everyone's requests and put our own needs last, then we're going to keep on facing the same situation of burnout, stress, and overwhelm. So it's important as people pleasers to establish really, really strong boundaries and stick to them and learn to get comfortable with saying no to other people and with them being displeased with you when you stick to your boundaries. It can help to remind yourself that these boundaries are in place to protect you, keep you safe and burnout free. So it can really help to make your autopilot response no rather than yes, and have responses prepared in advance so you're comfortable with saying no when the time comes, because a lot of the reluctance with saying no is we think it's going to be rude or come across not very polite. So to have those responses prepared in advance can be really helpful. So we found that really helpful, and we have learned to prepare ways to say no in a polite way. For example, you could say something like, I'd love to do that, but I'm currently at full capacity, so I wouldn't be able to give this thing the attention that I would really like to. So you really need to learn your own limits and be willing and able to express them so your boundaries aren't constantly overstepped and you're not always pushed beyond your limits. Otherwise, you will keep getting burnt out. Also, it's not just boundaries with other people you need. You really need to learn to set and stick to strong boundaries with yourself and your work. For example, how many days a week do you work? When are your rest days? What time of the day do you stop working? One boundary that you can set with yourself right now that will have a huge impact is the boundary to stop thinking about work when your work day is over. So most of us don't switch off at the end of the work day. We're usually still thinking about what we've done, what we've got left on our to-do list, or what we've got to do tomorrow, right up until the moment we go to sleep. So it's important to set a boundary that when your body leaves the desk at the end of the day, you take your mind with you and you stop thinking about work. Otherwise, what happens is you finish your working day and you think you've rested, but you actually end up going back to your work the next day even more tired, exhausted, and unproductive because you haven't really detached or got away. So learning to set really strong boundaries with yourself and your working schedule can be really helpful.
My next tip is to use the HALT acronym, which is very easy to remember. So it is a term used to describe the impact that being hungry, angry, lonely, or tired can have on an individual's behavior and decision making around food. And it reminds us to just take a moment, take a step back, and stop. Actually, HALT means stop. And then ask ourselves if we are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. For example, if you let yourself become extremely hungry or starved, you will most likely not be able to control yourself around food. If you are angry, you might impulsively eat or mindlessly eat a bag of chips and not notice that it's gone because you're so bothered, so overthinking. Um, the third one is when you're lonely and you might eat a piece of cake just to try to fill out this void that you have. And if you're tired, you might ignore your body's signal to just go rest or have a nap and end up eating to compensate the lack of energy. So it's important to recognize when you are feeling hungry, angry, lonely, and tired and stop, to take a step back and address those feelings in a thoughtful way. For example, this may include eating a nutritious meal for the hungry part, expressing your feelings in a healthy way, maybe talking to a psychologist if needed. That's the angry part. Reaching out to friends and family when you're lonely, and getting enough rest simply when you're tired. So HALT are really summarizing a lot of feelings that we might have. And by managing your emotional state, you can prevent the negative effect that HALT has or can lead to later on, and you're going to make healthier choices.
Our final tip is to align your life with your values and remove depleting tasks. Burnout is often experienced when we have too many commitments and too little joy, and a lot of the time, lack of joy can occur if we are living out of alignment with our values. When you are doing anything in your life, it's either going to be aligned to your values and who you are, and therefore give you more feelings of joy, or it's going to be out of alignment with your values, and therefore it's going to be a drain to your energy and an accelerator for stress and burnout. So where you can, eliminate the drainers in your life, whether it's certain people, projects that are unnecessary, or other things you're doing that are going against what you value in life. Sometimes it's obviously not possible to eliminate all those things, but there are situations where you can eliminate or at least reduce the time spent on what drains your time and energy. So an example of this is if one of your main values as a person is really freedom and adventure, but you're working in a way which is very repetitive and it's quite a tight and controlling environment, then you're going to be out of sync with one of your values. So here you won't feel joyful and you're more likely to burn out more regularly. So what you want to do is add into your life those things that you do value. So if you value nature, go out for a walk at lunchtime throughout the day. Or if you value creativity, once you're done with your working day, do something creative in the evening. And this in the long term is going to help you prevent burnout because you're going to have more joy and less resistance.
So to conclude from my end, stress management needs a whole body and mind approach, but knowing what foods to include and limit to support cortisol levels in the body, so just to keep them low and control them. And learning how to manage emotional eating is super important. So make sure to talk to your healthcare provider, whether it's a psychologist, dietitian, doctor. Whenever you require support or guidance, you can get back to us as well. And most importantly, forgive yourself and remember that progress takes practice and repetition.
At All Around Abundance, we are also currently looking for 50 people to speak with about their own burnout journey and experience. So if you're happy to share your experience with us, please click on a link we've left below to book a 20-minute call. So that concludes our tips. We hope you found them really useful. Thank you for joining us, Stephanie.
Thank you so much for having me, and it was a pleasure collaborating with you girls.
And do you just want to let everyone know as well where they can find you, and we'll link it all down below?
Yes, exactly, on my Instagram.
Okay, perfect. You can find Stephanie on her Instagram. We'll link it down below, and you can follow us at All Round Abundance. Thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed. Until next time.